Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here we are. This happened about 6 months ago, and I'm still amazed at how everything played out. For context, I'm a materials engineer working for a consulting firm in the city, and I'd been living in this high-end apartment building for exactly 2 years when my lease was up. The building was one of those new luxury developments that charged premium rent for what they called artisan finishes and premium amenities. My unit was on the 15th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows and this gorgeous hardwood flooring throughout the living areas. The building management always made a big deal about their exclusive finishes and how they maintained the highest standards. I should mention something important about my background. My father spent most of his career developing protective coatings for high-end flooring applications. He actually holds several patents in the industry, including one for a particular type of industrial polymer finish that's become pretty standard in luxury buildings. Growing up, I heard more about floor chemistry and coating applications than most people hear about sports or movies. It wasn't exactly dinner table conversation most families have, but my dad was passionate about his work. When I first moved into the apartment, I actually recognized the finish on the floors immediately. It was my father's proprietary coating system, something he called the Protective Polymer Series. I remember thinking it was funny that I was paying extra rent to live in a place that used my dad's invention, but I never mentioned it to anyone. It wasn't really relevant at the time. I was what you'd call a model tenant. I paid my rent 3 days early every month, never had parties, kept the place immaculate, and never bothered the building staff with complaints. The apartment was my sanctuary after long days at work, and I treated it with respect. When it came time to move out because I'd bought my own place, I spent an entire weekend cleaning every surface until the apartment looked better than when I'd moved in. The building's property manager was this guy in his early 30s who'd recently taken over the position. From what I gathered through casual conversations with other tenants, he was the building owner's son and was supposed to be learning the family business. He had this attitude like he was doing everyone a favor by allowing them to live in his building. During the few interactions I'd had with him over the years, he always seemed to be looking for problems rather than solutions. When I scheduled my move-out inspection, I figured it would be straightforward. I'd documented the condition of everything when I moved in, taken photos, and had maintained everything perfectly. My security deposit was $3,000, which was substantial but standard for the area. I wasn't worried about getting it back. The inspection was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I showed up 15 minutes early and found the property manager already waiting in the hallway, clipboard in hand, and wearing an expression like he was about to perform surgery. He introduced himself again, even though we'd met several times, and explained that he'd be conducting a thorough inspection to ensure the unit met their standards for the next tenant. We started in the kitchen, where he spent an unusual amount of time opening and closing cabinet doors, running his fingers along surfaces, and making notes on his clipboard. He found a tiny water spot on the stainless steel sink that I'd somehow missed and made a show of pointing it out. I offered to clean it immediately, but he waved me off and said he'd make note of it. The bedroom inspection went similarly. He found a small scuff on the wall where I'd bumped it with a suitcase months earlier, something so minor I hadn't even noticed it. Again, he made notes and moved on with this self-satisfied expression. But it was when we got to the living room that things took a turn. The property manager walked slowly around the space, examining the hardwood floors with intense scrutiny. The morning sunlight was streaming through the large windows, highlighting every detail of the beautiful wood grain and the smooth, protective finish. He stopped near the window area and crouched down, pointing to a spot about 3 feet from the wall. He called me over with this dramatic gesture and asked if I could see what he was seeing. I looked at the area he was indicating, and honestly, I couldn't see anything unusual. The floor looked exactly as it had for the entire 2 years I'd lived there. He explained to me that there was significant damage to the protective coating in that area. According to him, it looked like heavy furniture had been dragged across the surface, creating what he called deep scuffing that had compromised the integrity of the finish. He went on about how this particular coating was extremely expensive and specialized, and that any damage to it required complete replacement of the affected section to maintain the building's standards. I asked him to point out exactly where he saw this damage because I honestly couldn't see what he was referring to. He became somewhat condescending at that point, explaining that most tenants wouldn't be able to recognize damage to such a sophisticated finish, but that his trained eye could spot issues that others might miss. The conversation continued with him describing the repair process in dramatic terms. He said that because of the seamless nature of this particular flooring system, they couldn't simply patch or repair the damaged area. The entire living room would need to be refinished to match the rest of the apartment, which would require bringing in specialists who were certified to work with this specific coating. He pulled out his phone and started showing me photos of similar repairs that had been done in other units, though the images were so close up and technical that they didn't mean much to me as a layperson. He talked about how the building had invested heavily in maintaining the highest quality finishes and couldn't afford to compromise their reputation by allowing substandard repairs. As he continued his explanation, I started to get a sinking feeling about where this was heading. He hadn't mentioned money yet, but I could sense it coming. The way he kept emphasizing the specialized nature of the coating and the complexity of the repair process felt like he was building up to something significant. Finally, he got to the point. He informed me that, based on his assessment, the cost to properly address the flooring damage would be $15,000. This would obviously exceed my security deposit, so I'd be receiving a bill for the difference of $12,000 within 30 days. I think my jaw must have dropped at that point. $15,000 for what appeared to me to be absolutely nothing wrong with the floor. I asked him to explain again exactly what he was seeing because I was having trouble understanding how such a small area could require such an extensive and expensive repair. He repeated his assessment with this patient tone that people use when they think they're explaining something to someone who just doesn't get it. He mentioned the specific product name of the finish, calling it the Sterling Guard 5000 Industrial Polymer Finish, and explained how this wasn't just any ordinary floor coating. According to him, it was a cutting-edge protective system that cost more per square foot than most people's monthly rent. At this point, something clicked in my brain. Sterling Guard 5000. That was my father's patent. The name was slightly different from what he'd originally called it, but I recognized the formulation details that the property manager was describing. This was absolutely my father's invention, just rebranded by whatever company had licensed it from him. I managed to keep my expression neutral while this realization was sinking in. The property manager continued explaining how the damage I'd allegedly caused would compromise the entire aesthetic of the living space and how their wealthy clientele expected perfection in every detail. I asked him if he could provide all of this information in writing, including the specific details about the damage and the cost estimate. I explained that $15,000 was obviously a significant amount, and I'd want to review everything carefully and possibly get a second opinion before accepting responsibility for such a large charge. He seemed pleased by this request, probably thinking that my desire for documentation meant I was taking his assessment seriously and preparing to pay. He spent several more minutes writing detailed notes on his inspection form, including the exact location of the alleged damage, the specific product name of the finish, and his cost estimate for the repair work. He made sure to include technical details about why the entire living room would need refinishing, referencing the manufacturer's guidelines and the building's quality standards. He signed and dated the document with a flourish, then made a copy for me using a portable scanner he'd brought with him. As he handed me the paperwork, he explained the next steps in the process. I'd receive an official notice within a week demanding payment, and I'd have 30 days to either pay the amount or dispute the charges through their formal grievance process. He made it sound like disputing would be pointless, given the clear documentation of the damage and the detailed cost analysis he'd provided. After he left, I sat in my empty apartment looking at this document and trying to process what had just happened. On one hand, I was angry that this guy was trying to scam me out of $15,000 for damage that didn't exist. On the other hand, I was almost amused that he'd chosen to target someone whose family literally invented the product he was claiming to be such an expert on. I called my father that afternoon and described the situation. When I mentioned the product name and the specific details the property manager had provided, my dad immediately confirmed what I'd suspected. This was definitely his coating system, though apparently it was now being marketed under a different brand name by the company that had licensed his patents. My father was particularly interested in the property manager's claim about deep scuffing damage. He explained that the chemical structure of his polymer finish made that type of damage essentially impossible under normal circumstances. The coating was designed to be extremely resistant to scratching, scuffing, and other surface damage. For the kind of damage the property manager described to actually occur, someone would have had to intentionally attack the floor with industrial equipment. He also mentioned something interesting about the application process. If there were any visual irregularities in the finish, they were almost certainly due to improper installation or defects in the substrate preparation, not tenant damage. The coating was designed to maintain its appearance for decades under normal use. This conversation gave me an idea. Instead of getting angry or trying to argue with the property manager directly, I decided to take a different approach. I'd give him exactly what he was asking for, just not in the way he expected. I spent the next few days researching the current licensing arrangements for my father's patents. It turned out that his coating system was now owned by a major chemical company, but he still received royalties and maintained technical oversight for quality control purposes. His name was still listed as the primary inventor on all the patent documentation. I also did some research on the building itself and discovered that the property manager's father, the building owner, had paid a significant premium to license this particular coating system for the building. It was apparently a major selling point in their marketing materials, and they'd invested heavily in training their maintenance staff on proper care and maintenance procedures. A week later, I received the formal notice demanding payment, just as the property manager had promised. It was an official-looking document on company letterhead, reiterating all the details from our inspection meeting and providing a payment deadline 30 days from the date of the letter. Instead of paying or disputing through their grievance process, I decided to send my own formal response. I drafted a professional letter addressed to the property manager, his father, the building owner, and the corporate management office that oversaw the building operations. The letter was structured as a technical affidavit rather than an emotional complaint. I began by acknowledging receipt of their claim for $15,000 in damages to what they described as the Sterling Guard 5000 industrial polymer finish in my former apartment unit. I stated that while I was prepared to take responsibility for any legitimate damage I'd caused, I needed to verify that the flooring in question was actually the product they claimed it to be. I explained that as a materials engineer, I had professional obligations to ensure accuracy in technical assessments before accepting liability for specialized coating damage. Here's where things got interesting. I attached a copy of the original patent documentation for the coating system, clearly showing my father as the sole inventor. I also included technical specifications that demonstrated why the type of damage described in their assessment was inconsistent with the known properties of the material. The letter went on to explain that based on the chemical structure and application properties of this particular coating system, what the property manager had identified as tenant damage was more likely either surface residue buildup or a substrate preparation defect that had become visible over time. I offered to have the area professionally assessed by a certified chemist to determine the actual cause of any visual irregularities. I also mentioned that my family maintained technical oversight for quality control purposes on this coating system, and that we'd be happy to provide consultation services to help identify and resolve any installation or maintenance issues the building might be experiencing. The final paragraph was my favorite part. I explained that if the building management was absolutely certain they wanted the coating completely removed and replaced, my family's company also held the patents for the specialized solvents required for that process. We could provide those services at cost, which would be significantly less than $15,000, but would leave them with bare wood floors until they could arrange for proper reapplication. I sent this letter via certified mail to ensure delivery confirmation, and then I waited. The response came much faster than I expected. 3 days after my letter was delivered, I received a phone call from a very different-sounding property manager. Gone was the condescending confidence from our inspection meeting. Instead, he sounded nervous and uncertain, asking if we could schedule a time to discuss the situation further. I told him that everything I needed to communicate had been included in my letter and that any further discussion should involve his building management team since this had become a technical matter requiring specialized expertise. I suggested he might want to consult with whoever had overseen the original installation of the flooring to get their perspective on the situation. The next day, I got a call from someone identifying himself as the building owner. His tone was completely different from his son's approach. He was professional, respectful, and clearly concerned about the situation. He explained that he was familiar with my father's reputation in the industry and was eager to resolve what he described as a misunderstanding as quickly as possible. He asked if I'd be willing to have a brief conversation to clarify some technical details about the coating system. During this call, it became clear that he understood exactly what had happened. His son had tried to scam a tenant who happened to be connected to the very product that formed the foundation of their luxury marketing strategy. The building owner explained that they'd invested heavily in licensing this particular coating system specifically because of its reputation and durability. The last thing they wanted was any suggestion that there were quality or installation issues that could affect their relationship with the licensing company or their ability to market the building's premium finishes. He also mentioned that after receiving my letter, he'd had their maintenance supervisor inspect the area in question. The supervisor, who had been trained on proper care and maintenance of this coating system, confirmed that what his son had identified as damage was actually normal variation in the surface texture that had become more visible due to the apartment's southern exposure and the way morning sunlight hit that particular area. By the end of that conversation, it was clear that I'd be receiving a full refund of my security deposit. But the story doesn't end there. 2 days later, I received an overnight delivery package containing a check for the full amount of my security deposit, along with a formal letter of apology from the building owner. The letter acknowledged that there had been an error in the damage assessment and expressed appreciation for my professional handling of the situation. But the most satisfying part was what came next. The apology letter included a request for my family's company to provide consultation services for ongoing maintenance and care of their coating systems throughout the building. Apparently, the incident had made them realize they needed better technical oversight to prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. I responded to their consultation request with a professional proposal outlining our standard rates for technical advisory services. It wasn't cheap, but it was fair market rate for specialized expertise. They accepted immediately. A few weeks later, I noticed a job posting on the building management company's website for a flooring and finishes consultant position. The job description included requirements for technical expertise in protective coating systems and experience with high-end building maintenance. I had a pretty good idea why they'd suddenly decided they needed someone with those qualifications. I also heard through the building's tenant newsletter that the property manager had been promoted to a strategic planning role in the corporate office. Anyone familiar with corporate speak would recognize this as a lateral move that gets someone out of direct tenant interaction without the embarrassment of an obvious demotion. The whole experience taught me something valuable about the power of knowledge and the importance of staying calm under pressure. If I'd gotten angry and started arguing during that initial inspection, or if I'd just paid the $15,000 to avoid conflict, the property manager would have gotten away with his scam and probably would have tried it again with other tenants. Instead, by using what I knew and responding professionally, I not only got my full deposit back, but also created a business opportunity for my family's company, and ensured that this particular building would never try to pull something like this again. Looking back, I think what made this especially satisfying was that the property manager's own arrogance was what made his scheme backfire so completely. If he'd tried to charge me for something reasonable, like cleaning fees or minor repair costs, I probably would have just paid it and moved on. But $15,000 for non-existent damage was so outrageous that it forced me to dig deeper and discover the connection to my father's work. The property manager had counted on his tenants being intimidated by technical jargon and expensive-sounding repair costs. He probably figured that most people would either pay without questioning or would get frustrated trying to dispute such a complex-sounding assessment. What he didn't count on was encountering someone who actually understood the technical details better than he did. I've since recommended my father's consultation services to several other high-end buildings in the area, and apparently word has gotten around in the property management community about the importance of accurate technical assessments. It's funny how one entitled person's attempt at easy money can end up improving industry standards for everyone. The final irony is that the building now uses my family's expertise as a selling point in their marketing materials. Their website mentions their partnership with industry-leading technical consultants to ensure the highest quality maintenance of their premium finishes. They're essentially advertising the same expertise they tried to overcharge me for not knowing about. I drive by the building sometimes when I'm in that part of the city, and I always smile when I see their marketing banners advertising their expertly maintained luxury finishes. It's a good reminder that knowledge really is power, especially when dealing with people who think they can intimidate their way to easy money. The whole situation also strengthened my relationship with my father, who was initially concerned about someone misusing his product innovations, but ended up proud of how I'd handled the situation. He often tells this story at industry conferences now as an example of why proper technical training is so important in building management. As for the $15,000 the property manager thought he was going to collect, I estimate that the building has now paid at least twice that amount in consultation fees to my family's company over the past 6 months. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being better at someone else's job than they are. I never did find out if the property manager learned anything from this experience, but I doubt he'll be trying to scam tenants with technical claims he doesn't understand anytime soon, and if he does, hopefully he'll at least research who he's dealing with first. The most important lesson I took from all this is that sometimes the best way to deal with entitled people isn't to argue with them or get emotional. Sometimes the most effective response is to simply know more than they do and let their own mistakes catch up with them. In this case, the property manager's greed and arrogance created the perfect opportunity for his scheme to backfire spectacularly. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Many years back, I was working in an office for a company in one of their satellite sites. In general, for your day-to-day, you only needed to use one system, as it did everything that you technically needed. But it didn't do everything you actually needed. Now I was an older employee and was there before the new shiny bespoke software got rolled out, which meant I had login details for the old system, which was still the backbone of half of our head office work and fed into what we saw. This was really useful as it meant I could log in and access loads of information that we actually needed. Information that some faceless exec had decided to exclude from the new system. So, for the next 3 or 4 years, and I would log in every couple of days and download a report or two, giving us buying reports, stocking issues, and more that I could then share with the rest of our site. It wasn't confidential information, and while we could do without it, it definitely made life easier having it. Think of it as the difference between getting a drink in the middle of the night with the lights off. But it's a damn sight easier with the lights on. Anyway, we'd never had an issue and no one had complained until one day one of the department managers found out I was downloading reports from a system that she was adamant that only her team needed to use, and she contacted IT and had them revoke my access. And annoyingly, she did so without letting me know, which meant when I logged in the next time, well, I didn't, and just got an error message. Locally, we had no idea what had happened, so a quick email to IT and got told that Karen had had my access blocked. So then it's a quick email to Karen to find out why, and all I got was a short and curt, "You don't need access. If you need to know something, you ask my team." I figure there's 2 reasons for this. One being she's a power-hungry pain in the arse that likes to control people, and 2 is she'd been trying to expand her team, and I guess if you make 20 satellite stores run through her, then you create the workload you need to take on 2 or 3 more people so you can give your best friend flexible working hours. Allegedly. Oh, 3 reasons actually. She really hated me after I called her out once and humiliated her in front of the company directors, to which she lodged a complaint to HR demanding I be fired, only for the CEO to tell them to withdraw it as I hadn't done anything wrong after I named him as a witness to the event. So, malicious compliance time. Those reports I downloaded, granted it was only 2 or 3 reports and only 2 or 3 times a week, which doesn't seem like a big amount, but those reports helped resolve 50 plus complaints and inquiries per day, so now I guess we have to email her team each time. I told the rest of my team to run every query through me and I would email her team. 1, because I didn't want anyone else to get in trouble as I knew this was going to make her explode. 2, because I could field the queries to make sure each one was unique as we did get duplicate info requests, and if they've told me once, I didn't want to upset them by making them tell me twice. And thirdly, because I'm a dick, I wanted her to know it was me. She managed a week. By day 3, she had contacted my manager to complain, and by day 5, because I hadn't stopped, we still needed questions answered, she had a meeting with HR, and I got a cease and desist request, asking if I could send a single email at the end of each day with all the queries in. It turns out, if you email 6 people up to 50 emails a day, at some point someone misses an important invoice and a whole shipment gets delayed, or worse, gets canceled. The upside? Within a couple of months, her team was restructured, with different members being given regional coverage. Turns out the reason her team looked so busy is because they would count one job done by one person as being 6 jobs, 1 for each person because they were all included in the same emails. Turns out you don't need a bigger team if you're honest about the work they do. And secondly, the reports I downloaded, each person in her team now has to download them themselves twice a week and send them out to the stores in their region. The other stores had just decided that now they couldn't find out, there was no reason to know, and answered queries with "I don't know" for years, so we accidentally made their services better too. The next one is an entitled people story. So this happened when I was 14, and I'm 22, F now, so a lot of this is going to be from memory. Don't expect a lot of dialogue. Now that I'm living on my own, I feel safe enough to share one of the more ludicrous stories from when I lived with my family, and it just so happens to be one of the times where she acted like a stereotypical Karen. Around this time, The Secret Life of Pets had been airing in theaters, and so my mom took my brother and I to see the movie in the local theater. In the main hall was a mini arcade with a handful of claw machines and a couple of those motorcycle racing games, but some of these took quarters and others took tokens, which is integral to the story. We went in to watch the movie and it was okay. My brother found it boring, he was 10 at the time, and I didn't find it that entertaining either. My mom seemed to agree and I thought that we could just go home and sleep. But no, she spotted the rubber duck claw machine. the holy grail for any rubber duck collectors. And no, she didn't own a Jeep, she just loved rubber ducks. She had over 100 of them at one point before I moved out. My brother asks if he could get a rubber duck too, and she turns to him and asks, "Do you have money?" He responds with a solemn no, and she says in turn, "Well, then you don't get any." I didn't even bother asking. I knew her games by now. If it didn't benefit her, she wouldn't do it. She'd even picked out the movie and framed it as something my brother would like when it wasn't his type at all. So I wasn't surprised when she snapped at him and he just fell silent. She approached the token machine to get tokens, and that's when I see the little sign that says that the machine does not take tokens and only takes quarters. So, as the well-meaning daughter that I am who somehow still loved her mom, I try to speak up. "Hey mom, the machine doesn't take tokens." My mom ignores me, so I repeat myself, but then she snaps, "Shush! I'm getting tokens for the duck machine. You're not getting a ducking duck either." So, I let her do it. And watch as she buys $5 or $10 worth of tokens, don't remember which, only for the machine to, surprise surprise, not take her tokens. And she loses it. She tries several times to shove the tokens into the quarters slot, but they obviously don't work. I tried to tell her that I had warned her that the machine only took quarters, and she lost it on me, saying that I was lying to her and that I hadn't said a word about it before telling me to shut up. Right, Mom. Good to know. So, what else does she do but march up to the customer service desk to whine about the consequences of her own actions? My brother and I were just trying to hide behind the cardboard cutouts and pretend that we didn't know this crazy lady as my mom yells and stomps her foot like a petulant child, demanding that she get a refund for the tokens she bought for a stupid broken machine. The poor customer service employee, an older teen who looked like she also wanted to be anywhere but there, repeats herself over and over, explaining that the tokens were non-refundable and that she couldn't give my mom a refund. We were too far away to hear all of it, so I wouldn't be able to say if the employee threatened to call the police or if my mom just gave up, but my mom eventually storms off and yells for us to follow her out to the car. Once we get in, she throws the token cup into the cup holder, grumbling about how she was now stuck with these useless tokens and how the employee was a useless, uptight idiot. Then she declared that we would never be going to that theater ever again because it was run by scammers who wanted to steal her money. And we never went to the theater as a family ever again. Truly, Mom, you're such a genius. Because it's the cinema's fault that you blatantly ignored multiple signs and verbal warnings in the pursuit of rubber ducks and ended up with tokens that you couldn't use because nobody can be right but you. Even worse, she treated my little brother like crap because he had the audacity to ask if he could have a rubber duck too. Like, did she expect a 10-year-old boy to carry around his pocket change with him to the theater? Especially when that was our only plan for the night. It still makes me mad just thinking about it. That, among many reasons, is why I'm now no contact with her. My brother still lives with her, and I hope he can get out and be free from her influence as well. The next one is an entitled parent story. I, Transum16, have noticed that my mother keeps choosing people who hurt me rather than choosing me. Recently, my mom's friend who I've complained about before on here, we'll call her Shelly, has caused some more issues. When I was at work, I was unable to take a break till the last 30 minutes. This is because there was a big event going on and lots of people kept coming in and checking things out. I work at a dollar store. I couldn't walk away from my register for 1 minute. It was nonstop customers. I texted my mom's friend that I knew she'd be picking me up and I would be out later than I'd like because legally, I had to take my 30 and 10-minute breaks. I told her 40 minutes in advance. She started complaining that I was making her oldest daughter late for her after-school thing because I refused to take my breaks. I would have taken my break if I had a chance, but I couldn't. Finally, once on my break, I stepped outside to get away from everyone. My manager was with me and we were talking until Shelly called me. She started yelling at me saying I was disrespectful and ruining her daughter's things because I'd be late. She demanded for me to come to her car so she can take me home while on my break. I told her legally I can't leave and until my break is over I can't have my manager count my drawdown. If the cameras see me doing anything work-related on a break, I'd get fired right along with my manager. She kept yelling while I was explaining everything till my break was over. She had me crying and frustrated because she threatened to leave me or tell my mom that I wasn't listening. I told her I refused to get into her car and that I'd rather walk home. I didn't understand why she didn't just drop her kid off while waiting for me. She blamed me for her being late and drove off. I was crying and my manager heard everything, which only embarrassed me more. She got me inside where I went to call my mom and her ex-GF, who we live with RN. They didn't pick up at first because they are at work, but my mom called me back first. Instead of listening, she started yelling at me, saying that I was wrong for being on a break and that I ruined everything. She threatened to call my father to pick me up. My father, mind you, is the same man who for years would beat me till I bled for anything. If he was mad, I'd get beat. If he was drunk, I'd get beat. If I got a C on a test, I'd get beat. He also would do the same to my mother, so the fact she'd let me get into a car with him alone got me mad. Like, why would you let your kid in a car with the man who abused y'all for years? Anyway, I told her I'd rather walk home in stolen than get into the car with either one of them. She said fine, go ahead, and hung up. My manager, who again heard everything, comforted me. She was on my side and tried to call the XGF again. Once the XGF picked up, she was upset at my mom and Shelly for doing this to me and agreed for my manager to take me home. After that day, my mom promised she'd never talk to Shelly again, but she still does. She goes over to her house, smokes weed with her. They still are friends. When I confronted her about this, she said sorry to me, she feels bad. She is pregnant, we can't stress her out. It just made me realize my mom will never choose me. She didn't choose me when my dad was beating me. She didn't choose me when I was getting SA and bullied at school. She didn't choose me when my uncle, her brother, choked me. She'll never actually choose me till I'm begging and crying for help. Even then, she'll still go back. I don't understand what I did for my mother to do this to me. My manager, who I see as a mother figure, says it's how some people are and we can't do anything to change them. She'll notice she made the wrong choices when I leave, but I don't want to wait for her to see. I want her to choose me. She says I gotta go over to Shelly's place because she's going, but I don't want to. When I used to go, Shelly would make me do her 5-day-old dishes, make dinner, babysit her youngest kid, my lil brother and my baby stepbrother, walk her dogs and clean. Her oldest just ignores me unless I buy her something, so I'm alone and working over there. I hate being her maid. I hate that my mom never chooses me. I hate that I'll never have a single parent that actually listens. Am I selfish for wanting them to never talk? I want her to actually listen to me for once. When I asked her to listen, all I get is her crying about how she's so hurt by my actions. Her ex, GF, is now trying to convince me to forgive my mom and Shelly because I'm stressing them out. But I don't want to. They'll do it again if I do, right? I need some advice and other PPLS advice. Am I doing what's right or am I being petty? Anyway, thank you for watching.